You are listening to part 3 of our continuing conversation with Alan Green.
Welcome to SkyBlue Symposia, a convivial gathering for stimulating conversation and a free interchange of ideas. I'm Gemini, your host for our symposium with Alan Abbadessa Green. Sibel and Chipper will be joining our conversation. Alan is an author, researcher, and editor of SyncBook3, Myths, Magic, Media, and Mindscapes, and SyncBook3, Outer and Inner Space, Shadow and Light. Both books explore synchronicity and synchromysticism through the writings of authors within the sync community. Alan is well-versed in contemporary myths, memes, and synchronicities, revealing amazing insight into ourselves, our culture, and our world. SyncBook Radio features 2 weekly podcasts, 42 minutes, and always record with an archive of conversations and interviews with some of the most intriguing minds. Additionally, Alan is the author of a blog titled Look at All the Happy Creatures in his soon-to-be-released book, Suicide Kings.
Hi, Alan. This is Sibel. And so the idea that we kind of create our reality with our thinking has me thinking about, the younger generations of how are they thinking and what is that going to create? So do you have a sense of how the current younger generations' outlook is different from prior generations?
I mean, I don't know. I want to say that I think I do, but I think every man over, 30 years old thinks he can figure out what the younger generation's doing and then realizes he doesn't. So maybe I shouldn't answer that one. I don't know.
Well, I guess what are the good things you see coming out of it, and what are the shortcomings you see coming out of the younger generation?
Well, I think what's going to be fascinating is this idea that we don't know a generation that grows up only knowing high-speed internet access and, smartphones. How are they going to perceive the world around them? I think this is a question we talked before. This is the Marshall McLuhan idea. If the medium sort of shapes society and in a sense is an expression of society, the generations that grow up taking this stuff as normal, I don't even know if we can begin to figure out how they're going to perceive the world differently. One thing I could say pretty confidently is this idea of a non-linear, I kind of keep focusing on this idea of non-linear. This is definitely an outcropping of an internet age where, for example, you can go to Wikipedia and you get a non-linear version of history, right? Because you can be reading an article, but then you click on, somebody's name in there, and suddenly you're reading about them. And you have this sort of multi-dimensional connections between everything, where you're no longer going straight through history, you're going sideways through history, up and down through history. And this is sort of taken for granted. This is just how we take in the information. It's unquestionable to me that this is going to shape the way in which we view reality. As a synchromystic, I think I'm already, like I said, maybe I can't speak for the younger generation, but I think my community here is sort of a canary in the coal mine for what this kind of thinking leads to, where you understand the connections between everything because the internet has shown you that everything's connected. I can click over from one thing to another, and then I step out off the internet and I step into a world where, oh my God, these synchronicities follow me around and everything's connected. And we're discovering that we're seeing reality through this lens. And, I didn't get into this. I didn't have internet access until, nearly 20 years old. I can only imagine what happens when someone grows up with that. So to one extent, I can only say that it's going to get weirder. It's definitely going to get weirder. I
just saw a video on there's the Electric Universe. Thunderbolts guys do videos, and he was talking about how you can make a simple equation, like a black square goes next to two white squares, and then there's one black square below it or whatever. And so you can teach the computer a simple equation of the order of black and white squares, but then and it's an understandable rule, it's a simple rule, but if you extrapolate it out, 250,000 times, it creates this pattern that almost looks like chaos, and it's not predictable. But it is a pattern that's based on a rule. And I could see just having people having access to so much information and living in it. I mean, I know, little kids who are like 4 years old, somehow they grok computers. They can work your iPad no problem.
Exactly. Yeah. One of the things, there's definitely going to be I don't mean this necessarily in a bad sense, but there's going to be the generational gap, which for this generation I think is going to be huge because of that. And one of the things you have to consider, this doesn't necessarily mean that they're more advanced or anything like that, but again, their thinking is going to be incredibly different from the get-go, and they're going to grow up being used to that. But this is just from I'm going to first give you my little cautious thing. I said, I had a conversation with Bill Klaus. We were talking, it was around Christmas, and we were talking about the idea of kids who got smartphones for Christmas presents. I sort of was like a little annoyed. I was like, if I went up to a 6-year-old and handed them a tab of acid, I would go to jail. People would tell me, I'm not saying I want to do that. I'm just being in a hypothetical here. If I did that, I would go to prison, right? How could you do this horrible thing and give this child this thing? Well, what the hell do you think an iPhone is? Do you not? The idea that this thing is something that it can bring you into contact with every piece of information around that's collected human understanding in seconds, show you anything that you can see uncensored reality, to give that to a child. I'm not necessarily saying it's a bad thing in the sense that, but it's uncontrollable. It's no one really thinks about what that's going to do, not only to the mind of the child, but there's no way to rein that in. There's no way, we don't want to go down the road of like a Chinese internet system of, hey, we're going to allow you to see some of this stuff. No, when you give a child internet access and a computer, you're basically letting them loose into all this chaos and all this sort of stuff, and they're going to have to process things, perhaps earlier than we would expect. It's unquestionable to me that a young child is not looking at like pornography that we would find shocking on an older generation, but it's undeniable to me that's happening. Now that child then will have to try and figure out how that'll affect their sexual development, their psychological development. That's, like I said, not necessarily all bad things. I'm just saying these are things we're going to have to wrestle with. But also the fact that a child would have a nonlinear understanding, the fact that there would be less of a human to human connection and more of an understanding using the computer as the intermediary. I knew a couple years ago who they lived together in a studio apartment, a small apartment, and they had 2 desks side by side, one sitting right next to the other, each at their computer, and they would email each other from sitting at the computer next to each other. And when they got into a fight, she would sit there and write him a long letter, and then he'd respond back and all this sort of stuff. They were sitting right next to each other, but didn't know how to communicate on a personal, face-to-face level. I mean, that's insanity to me. But this is something that, this is one of the dangers. And I don't mean to focus on the dangers, but see, the reason I equate this to psychedelics and this sort of Dionysian thing is when I say it's the ultimate liberation, it's like, yes, these children, are very comfortable exploring these realms. And then just to say, then there will be a section of that population that will not know how to process it, who the same way we would have, in the 60s, you have, people who were exploring LSD and then someone ends up as a heroin addict, which they're two very, very different substances, but some people don't know how to make that distinction and get lost along the way. A Dionysian mystery school, someone can find enlightenment and someone can find schizophrenia. Hey, it happens. With, not to be cold, but say this is what we can expect. Now with this, age of exploration, this idea of exploration through the internet, they're going to find all sorts of things that we can't even think about yet, let alone know how they're going to handle it. And it's going to be what's normal to them. It's the same way when I talk about, moving from New York down south, and it's a culture shock for me. Well, I think we're going to find that the generation that's coming up now and the world that they're living in is going to be complete and total culture shock for most of us. Even those of us who are using the internet who think we get it, I think it's going to be so radically different. And I don't mean like we're going to have, flying cars and Jetsons and stuff. Like it's the idea of a consciousness that is so radically different. Rather than, the world still kicks on the same old way for the most part, but it's the way in which you relate to it that I think is really, really changing.
Yeah, I guess they're interacting with an incredibly dynamic reality that's always changing. And, an older generation had some stability. But I think also the younger generation, one of their challenges is going to be discernment.
I'm so glad. To me, that is the biggest issue. Like, I have a note, sitting on my desk that says, yes, there is a relation, but what is the nature of that relationship? And then underline discernment. It's like, is it an intentional conspiracy? Is it a synchronicity? What is this nature of this? And this idea of discerning between what it is you're doing, I think it's definitely the biggest issue that we're going to have to face. And I mean, I give the younger generation credit is that in a lot of ways they're super smart, and I'm glad that they find a lot of this stuff really easy to navigate. And then I just hope that they don't get, I said, there's all the, besides from all the dangers we've discussed, there's another one I would throw out there would be, this sort of, because we live in a post-maximum novelty 2013, right? There's this sort of weird, nihilism that comes from where nothing really means anything. Nothing really has any substance to it anymore, or everything's so temporary and so fleeting that, which again is, in some ways is a brilliant advance. Like, this is what, most Buddhist traditions have been trying to teach us for the longest time. Everything's temporary, nothing's permanent. That's great. And then how do you process that though without we're not having a generation of Buddhist monks, we're having a generation of ADD sufferers,
Yeah, and whether that assists you or hinders you in coping with constant information, I'm not sure.
I'm not sure either. Which is why I said I don't want to the reason I guess I'm focusing on some of the dangers is because I hope if someone hears this, hey, I'm just letting you know what I'm hoping there's a young person listening right now and and says, that guy doesn't know what he's talking about. I can take care of this, and I hope you do. So. Like I said, I don't know what they're going to have to face. I can only speak it's as much as I can try and wrap my head around these things, we are all products of our generation, and it's the fact that things change so fast now, particularly since the media and the devices have changed so quickly. I don't want to go into technology is all that, but like I said, it really has. The technology itself is kind of, in a way, it's kind of dumb. I want a flying car. I don't, but at the same time, it really does shape the fact that you can have this little device in your pocket that can tell you where you are, on the globe at any given moment, and you can just do all these things, and you have access to, constant access to knowing how to answer any question. If there's something you want to know, we used to get into debates. Hey, do you remember, who was the guy who played the, Dr. Zaius in, Planet of the Apes? Oh, let me pull out my phone and I'll tell you in a second, that's just a stupid example, but there's the idea of there's no question that really has to go unanswered. Bill Klaus, from Always Record, he's made the point, it used to be if you got a flat tire on the side of the road, and let's say you didn't know how to change a tire, you would have to call AAA, or you'd have to call a tow truck to have someone do it for you. Now you could theoretically pull up a YouTube video. How do I change a tire? It's the idea of understanding how to utilize this technology. We have access to anything, but are we using it to look at cats and nipples, or are we looking at it to fix our actual problems and educate ourselves? It's this fascinating thing. Is I have a sister-in-law who I think she's probably 16 now. I don't know, 15 or 16, and she got really into Rubik's Cubes, and she can do a Rubik's Cube in about 11 seconds. You can scramble it up as much as you want, and she can fix a Rubik's Cube in about 11 seconds.
Oh my gosh.
And the thing is, she looked up on YouTube how to do it. She didn't figure it out, right? So this is an interesting thing. She didn't figure out how to solve a Rubik's Cube, but she figured out how to fix a Rubik's Cube. She went and learned the steps and then developed this skill and tried until she could do it faster and faster and faster and faster. Apparently there's a sort of trick to it. There's a pattern that you can do. And I asked her to show me. It's a fairly complex pattern, but then you have to just do that. You have to go through these motions, and you can do it. And then you just get faster and faster and faster at it. And it's this just interesting little thing. It's so we'll have a generation that if they want to learn something, they can. It's not going to be a generation of Einsteins where everybody can look at a Rubik's Cube and fix it in 3 seconds because they're just crazy geniuses, but in a weird sort of way, they are, because all it requires is the willingness to learn. Do you know what I mean? It's
they have access to all the knowledge.
Right. It's fascinating. It's just, yeah, exactly, and a desire. That's what I'm saying. They have to have enough ambition to actually go and learn it. It was the idea is you could still call AAA, or you can watch the thing, how do I change a tire? You have to have, you're still the human being. This is when we talk about left brain, right brain. You have the Akashic records are there at your fingertips, but you, monkey man, still have to push the buttons, and you still have to fix the tire. But the wealth of knowledge is there for you if you want it.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see what that wrinkle in the change of how people think affects the world going forward. It will have an effect, but I can't figure it out.
I don't think it, so I said, you look at McKenna, he said, I think he's probably a whole lot smarter than I am. And I refer back to him because it's here's a guy who was very, very accurate as to what he saw coming down the road. But even he, when people asked him, he'd say, I don't know. The whole point is that it would be something that we can't imagine. It's we can imagine, we can understand a certain idea of okay, we're going, computers are going to be everywhere. And then we would have this sort of mediated society, and that time's not going to make as much sense anymore, and that linear time. Like, he took this idea of a time machine at the end of 2012. And to me, my thing is, when I was on Red Eyes, I mean, this was sort of like something that just sort of came out as I was talking, and then I realized afterwards, like, I wish I had sort of thought it through a bit more, like that I could explain it better. But if you think about it, you have this correlation where here we are, a generation that's figuring out a non-linear understanding of time. And I said, is that either A, the same thing as a time machine, or B, the kind of understanding that one would need in order to build one? And then, not to do the classic time paradox, but to say at the same time, if someone were to build a time machine, you would have the idea of it would lead to an understanding of a non-linear relationship of time. You sort of have this feedback loop that it almost is kind of the same thing. It's sort of the understanding and the would lead to the creation of it, or the creation of it would lead to the understanding, however you want to say that. But obviously we didn't see on 2012, we didn't see the DeLorean take off and people go flying 100 years into the future. But that's the attempt to try and rationalize, what does this mean? What is a future in which time doesn't really make sense anymore? What does that mean? And he said, well, the only thing I could really kind of think of is maybe if you had a time machine, that would be kind of the same thing. Now, I'm arguing that a non-linear understanding of time is kind of the same thing. That we would come to a point where history is not, there's no more history, there's no more future. Is that because we live in a now culture, or is it because our ideas of what's past, what's present, what's future are getting kind of jumbled? And again, it's not necessarily the healthiest thing, or it's not the easiest thing to navigate, but I think that's sort of what I'm trying to say, though, is that in a weird sort of way, he was right. But any attempt to actually say what that would look like is probably doomed to be highly inaccurate.
Yeah, but I can see how synchronicity is part of the language of understanding it.
Oh, yeah, because, see, the whole thing of synchronicity is that it's something that it's two moments in time and space coming together in a weird sort of way, right? Like, if you have a synchronicity where the guy at the supermarket in the aisle next to you says something that you're thinking about. Now, obviously, there's multiple ways you could say, is that some sort of psychic phenomenon? Is that psychic leakage, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But regardless of what the mechanism is, when we say the idea of these two events in time happening synchronous, right? Sync being together, chronos, time, happening together in time, two events happening together in time. Well, now sometimes we're also calling a synchronicity, though, is the idea that, just yesterday I was thinking about something, and then today, I was thinking about my friend Charlie all day yesterday, and today I get a letter in the mail from him, or, whatever it is. That's still close enough we would call that a synchronicity, and in a weird way, it's, there's a guy in SyncBook Volume 2, there's a guy, Robert Perry, who's trying to argue that there's, to put a sort of time frame aspect on synchronicity, et cetera, that's an interesting argument we can go into, but ultimately what I'm saying is that synchronicity, as classically understood, is defined as it's a sort of temporal phenomenon. The time is very much a factor in it. It's two things happening coincidentally in time that almost shouldn't, or that we're taking note of, like, wow, that happened at the same time as that happened. And again, it's a reflection of the inner and the outer. It's a reflection of all these different things. It's sort of the holographic universe reflecting back on itself. But it's these two moments in time, or these two events in time, that we're taking special note of, wow, these sort of things happen together. Well, in a true sort of highly psychedelic understanding of now, right? It's always now. Well, if there is no past and there's no future, these synchronicities are little glimpses at a now in which all things exist at the same time. If that makes sense, these are little glimpses into that kind of perception. And thankfully, and I mean this very seriously, thankfully, it's only little glimpses. Because we're not ready, we're not ready, or maybe not meant to have that all the time. We don't want to live in, Salem, Massachusetts, where people aren't ready, like I said, or maybe aren't meant to always exist in that kind of headspace. There's a certain niceness about being able to say to your friend, I'll meet you at 3:00 at the coffee shop. Once time has no meaning, it's going to be kind of hard to figure out when to meet them, right? Yeah. So thankfully, these are only little glimpses into that kind of headspace. But nonetheless, they're a indication of how much perception shapes. I don't know if I'm saying this right, but how perception shapes time. Does time shape perception, or does perception shape time? If I think it's all happening at once, and I have these little portents into that kind of headspace, and it really is happening like that, well, am I authorizing my own, universe? Have I become the writer of my own story? Or is this an external force acting on us and causing us to play it out that way? I don't know. I started this new job here, and it was so funny to me. I don't talk about, I keep my, if I have a day job, I try and keep that very separate from anything else that I do. Because I assume if I start talking about some crazy shit, I won't have a job long. So, but it was so funny to me because the first day that I'm there, the people at my job start, weirding out about these weird, strange coincidences that are happening to them. This is so weird. Why is this happening? And I'm like, did I bring that? Do you know what I mean? It's these people are totally weirding out about what they don't even know. They don't even know what a synchronicity is. But they're just oh my God, this is so weird. Why does this keep happening? And it's I'm just being completely silent. I'm oh, that is really weird. And I'm did I do that? I don't know. Sorry.
Yeah.
This cloud of non-linear time floating around me. I don't know.
That's your personal environment, Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Well, I had kind of a question about, environment versus inner. And you know how newly pregnant women will notice, other pregnant women, and they never saw pregnant women before. And so how much of that kind of thing are just noticing the environment, new things are there, or is it the inner state of we're looking differently?
I think you said interstate there. I thought you must. For a second, I heard interstate because I was thinking there's this sort of classic example that skeptics use, and they say, if I tell you to think about blue cars, you're suddenly going to start seeing blue cars everywhere, right? So as you're saying this, I'm thinking about these cars, and I think you said interstate. So, but same thing, right? Interstate. This idea that, so someone says, hey, if I tell you to look out for blue cars, you're suddenly going to go, oh my God, I didn't know. This is, I don't know why, it's a pretty dumb example, but I've heard this example argued many times, the blue cars example. But that's obviously a sort of, again, it's a crappy example because a true synchronicity, there's no questioning when you feel that connection and you feel it. And when it's obscure enough, it validates it. If, a blue car, okay, there might be 10,000 blue cars on the road and you just never noticed them before. I mean, that is an actual phenomenon. We've all had it. You learn a new word and then suddenly you start seeing it multiple places or things like that. Or like I said, you buy a blue car, and then suddenly you see everyone on the road has that same car. Well, this is a real thing where we have a perception bias. But like I had this thing where last year around Christmas, I don't remember exactly. I think this was around Christmas, and I was looking for work. I had just finished SyncBook3. It went longer than it should have, and I was looking to go back to a day job. And I was like, okay, I've been working as a waiter, and I was like, all right, looking for jobs. And there was this restaurant called Balthazar, and this was in Manhattan. I was like, okay, sent them my resume or something. And my wife and I get into this whole long conversation about the word or the name Balthazar. And I said something like, I thought it was like one of the quote-unquote three wise men or the three magi, right? And she said, I thought it was like the name of a demon. So like we look it up online, and apparently both are true. There is some sort of demon that's called a Balthazar, and there's some sort of one of the guys who brings like the frankincense or myrrh is named Balthazar. And we're just like, okay, so we have this whole long conversation. We're doing like research about Balthazar and trying to fix that argument and figure out what it was and all this sort of stuff. And I step outside, and we went to go pick up some groceries, and the guy, this is like 5 minutes later, and I go out of my house, we go in, and there's some guy standing next to me, and he's like talking to someone else, and he goes, Balthazar, yeah, it's blah, 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 and I'm like, it's not the same thing as a blue car example, because I don't think there's 10,000 people walking around down the street going, Balthazar, 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 Balthazar. It's like a pretty obscure thing. In this, this might not be the greatest example, but I think you understand what I'm saying. It's like when it's something that's extra bizarre or extra unexpected, then it can't be just attributed to some sort of perception bias. That, now I didn't go out looking for Balthazar, and I would assume that even if I tried to, that's not the kind of thing that you're going to encounter on a regular basis. Now, blue cars, yeah, maybe more so than people saying Balthazar. Pregnant women, I would assume there are a good number of them, and we have a few billion people on this planet, but I'm not, I think your question is a really valid one, because I would assume, so this is my sort of, I gave you this sort of, quasi-straight-laced answer, but now my intuition tells me that there would definitely be a connection between pregnant women, that they would notice each other, that they would feel some sort of connection in this sort of bond, whether that's a natural sort of tribe instinct to sort of, stay together and learn from each other or help each other as is needed, and a sort of natural instinct for tribe, or if there's some sort of, psycho-spiritual connection between the two. But either way, it seems almost obvious to me that there would be a really strong bond there, and that these women would draw to each other. And I would think that it can't be attributed to something like the blue car nonsense. I think it's definitely something else.
Yeah, I could see, pregnant women needing other pregnant women, and having other pregnant women show up because they need each other.
Yeah, absolutely. Particularly in this day and age where we don't have very good sense of, community that nurtures not only are children not particularly well taken care of, but the families that have to take care of these children aren't well taken care of, right? So a pregnant woman still needs a lot of care. I would argue the husband of the pregnant woman still probably needs a lot of care. We all in this world need each other very, very much. And this is, but I definitely, your point is incredibly well taken. I think at least another pregnant woman would understand, they would understand each other and sort of their needs, and they would draw that to themselves. I think that sounds really, really, really likely.
Well, and then I had another question about how things come in threes. So this can be negative, like, there's 3 deaths, or positive, like 3 coworkers find out that they're going to be grandparents. What's your understanding of things coming in threes? Is it people paying attention, or is it, astrologically the stars are aligned for that circumstance to keep happening? What do you think?
It's interesting because it's funny, like, as a guy who's into synchronicity, right, I hear that expression a lot, like things happen in threes. It's a pretty common expression, and I can't say that I've ever really sort of clued in on that as being any more true than anything else. It's funny because this was just addressed. I just finished the book Foucault's Pendulum, and they sort of addressed that. I mean, the whole thing's meant as a sort of to take a sort of skeptical approach to a lot of this stuff, but they make an argument against specifically against that. So it's funny when you asked that. That's right where my head went. But I would say there is, like, when I talked about that whole sort of like King Kill weekend and things like that, there was definitely this sort of aspect of the 3 cities. We constantly see, there's I mentioned like the Catherine wheel, there's also this idea of the Trident. You can see, just as quick examples, like Dealey Plaza is shaped as a trident. The World Trade Center, if you actually look at when you look at the building, normally when you look at those towers, they look like these straight lines going across it. But if you look at the bottom, those straight lines all come together in these groups of 3 prongs. They look exactly like tridents. Osama bin Laden, when he gets killed, he's killed by the Navy SEALs, whose symbol is a trident. It's an eagle carrying a trident, and they called it Operation Neptune Spear. Well, Neptune doesn't actually carry a spear; he carries a trident. So when you say Neptune Spear, it's a sort of play on the word trident, right? It's interesting, like that. I've sort of clued in on that, and then obviously we have Holy Trinities throughout, but as far as that having any particular relevance I can't say that I do. In Foucault's Pendulum, like I said, I don't agree with a lot of the arguments made in there, but I just want to give you what they said because it's actually really interesting. It's a sort of unsexy, duh answer, but I like it not because it should take any of the magic out of anything, but because it should really speak to the real idea of what a trinity would convey. So in the book, the guy's he's starting to think all these like weird conspiracies and stuff, and he speaks to his wife, and she says, the reason that there's so many trinities is because, I'm a woman, you're a man, and we're 2 different things, and we understand that this is 2, and you put 2 and 2 together and you make 3, and that a child would be, the ultimate of what a union of 2 opposites would bring, and this is the sort of magical third, and this is the ultimate magical act that 2 human beings can perform, or any human being can perform, is to join together and to produce a third. And so this is why we place so much emphasis on this. And she sort of tells him this as to one extent, to take any of the mysticism out of it, and on the other hand, to say, like, this is magic. In a sense, it's almost mundane magic. There's like, there's like the old Bill Hicks routine that's, it says, like, when a woman says that, oh, she had this baby, look, it's a little miracle. And he's like, no, it's not a miracle. Everyone can do this, and it happens all the time. There's billions of, if there's a billion miracles, they're not miracles. I would disagree with that. This is the idea. I guess it's weird today. I'm just kind of directing you guys to other little avenues you can explore. But there's the graphic novel Watchmen. They made a movie out of it a few years ago, but the graphic novel is really pretty damn incredible and much better than the movie. And there's this guy in there who, his name is Dr. Manhattan. He's the blue glowing guy you might have seen from the movie. And basically he ends up with this almost synchronistic, expanded consciousness where he experiences all of time and space as happening at the same time. And this is sort of what we were talking about before. He exists in this sort of painful state where everything is all at once, and the past and the future have no real meaning. But it's a really interesting exploration of what that would be like to live in that space all the time. Anyway, he since he sort of sees everything all at once, and every molecule is just as important as every sun, he gets to this point where, like, what's the value of a human life? And why should I step in to save somebody when this is just this sort of grand cosmic dance? And then he thinks he understands everything. So he's sort of like, well, what does it all matter? It's all just how life plays out. And then he has this woman that he loves, and he realizes, oh, wait, that is a miracle. Everything is a miracle. Like, every life has value, every life is special, and every life is a miracle, and that those are worth fighting for, worth trying to save, and worth valuing. And that's more of where I come in line with all this. When we say, like, synchronicity shows us everything's connected. Everything's connected. And that, the crappy pop song is just as wonderful and just as much a miracle as is the greatest painting in any museum. This is true, and as much as I struggle with that answer sometimes, it's that everything really is a miracle. Every life is special. And this idea that this Trinity would be representative of this ultimate act, it's not, like I said, it's not like a sexy magic answer, but it should almost be really obvious to us that this is, of course, one of our highest ideals, and it's something we really should value.
Yeah, and I think when I think of the people that I know that have experienced the things coming in threes, they experienced everything as connected with that.
Like all three events are sort of connected into each other.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm sorry, I don't know if that was really if that really answered your question, but that's sort of where I go on that.
Yeah, no, that makes sense to me. And then I guess my last question is, what kind of syncs or signs give you hope about the future?
It's a cop-out, but what I was just saying, basically all of it does. It's the sum of the parts in one sense, right? Any particular sync is a signpost on the road. It's a little reminder. But when you sort of zoom out and you look at the whole picture that creates, that it shows you that everything is connected, it's just very reassuring. We're not alone. We're all in this together. This doesn't take away from personal sovereignty. As I said, I'm very much an advocate of personal sovereignty and responsibility. And yet at the same time, there is this undeniable truth that we're all intimately connected with each other, and that we all are sharing one existence and certainly, one world. And this idea that we kind of need each other, but also have each other, and that no one is separate. We've all had moments where we felt horribly alone in this world. And I think there's something about this that shows us we never have to feel that way. You never have to feel that way again. As someone, it's sort of a silly tangent from a nice thing I was saying, but it's like, as a very private person, there's still, again, the importance for individuality and all that. We should balance. I don't never want to encourage someone to go too far into like a total collectivism. I don't support a hive mind or anything like that. Very much value the individual. Even, Carl Jung, who he studied all this stuff, collective unconscious, but to him the secret was individuation, right? So this is a goal, is to find a way to be yourself in the midst of all of this, but to know that we're all doing it. You're trying to find yourself. Everyone in this call is trying to find themselves. I'm trying to find myself. I'm no better than anyone else. And we're trying our best, but we have each other. We have each other to lean on, and we also have something. I'm hesitant to put a name on it, but there's something that keeps us all connected with each other. Whether you want to call that God, the universe, whatever term you like, or if we want to attribute it to some sort of force like gravity or magnetism. It doesn't have to be an intelligence. Whatever you're comfortable sort of wrapping your mind around. My point, though, is that there is something that keeps us all very intimately connected, and it gives me a lot of hope, because we all, in a weird sort of way, as much as we're individuals, we all experience very similar challenges throughout life, where you feel like, I can't do this, or, I'm not good enough, or, someone likes that guy's radio show better than my radio show, or, I wrote this book and this book sucks, or, whatever it is. You go through all these little things, and then you realize that every guy who's ever tried to write a book, this book totally sucks. And everybody who's had the balls to try and start a radio show and go out there and put their voice and ideas on something goes, oh my God, I can't believe I just said that. Or, I must sound like a fool. Or, I don't like the sound of my voice. So, but you just try these things anyway. We're all trying to do the same sort of thing. And it's incredibly rewarding and uplifting to understand that and realize that. And still try and be yourself in that. It's a wonderful challenge, and again, a wonderful opportunity. I hope I didn't paint everything today in a sort of dark sense by giving some of the potential dangers, but I'm saying it's a struggle and an opportunity. Like, yeah, we have to to be self-sovereign, to take responsibility for your actions is a hard thing to do. It is a struggle. It's a hard thing to do, but it's so damn rewarding. And the same way, going through this sort of path where we understand the way we interact with each other and understanding that we're trying to find a sense of ourselves in all this, trying to find ourself or the self, however we want to take that. It's a struggle, and it's hard at times, but it's so damn rewarding to be able to have these realizations and to be able to understand that and not feel like you have to go through a lot of that darkness, so that you're going through that darkness alone. It's just really, really uplifting.
Thank you. That was lovely, because I agree with a lot of that. We are here consciously exploring from each of our different perspectives, and each of us adding dabs of paint to the picture,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Alan, thank you so much for joining us tonight. And this has been a fascinating conversation, and I understand that you are working on the book Suicide Kings and perhaps SyncBook3 for 2014?
SyncBook3 I'm not really thinking about yet. I'm not ready to jump back into another sync book yet.
Okay.
I gave myself till 2014, but I didn't say what month 2014. Meaning, when I put out SyncBook2, I said, I'm not thinking about this again for at least a year. It's definitely a labor of passion, a labor of love. I'm really I want so badly to bring these things out and get these ideas out there, but it's a tremendous amount of work, and not just to be honest, it takes a lot of personal sacrifice, both on my personal life, my finances, my relationship with my wife, all that sort of stuff. Everything's got to go on the back burner to make this happen, and to try and coordinate with 26 different people, try and bring the tasks together. And then it's funny because we make not very much money off this, really not very much money off this, but of course there is some money involved, so trying to figure out, then to do the accounting to make sure that, we're splitting that up amongst the 26 of us, or in some cases, I think SyncBook2 is like 28 or 29 of us, because we had other people who worked on the book besides the authors. And so it's like, at that point, it's a full-time job to do something like this, and then the work keeps coming even after the book is done. There's still stuff you have to do, whether it's, promotion or doing the accounting or taking care of the website. And it's a tremendous commitment, and I'm so glad that I do it, but I just felt like I was burning out a little bit, and I'm trying to do Suicide Kings. I've been working on that book for over a year, doing a tremendous amount of research and then outlining, and I started writing it, and I really didn't like how it was coming together, so I did a series of rewrites, and then I finally found this way that, okay, I got it. I know how to present this book. And I got about 160 pages into it, and then it was time to drop everything and do SyncBook2. So I'll admit a certain amount of, at first there was a little bitterness towards it. Like, no, I found my zone, I was really enjoying what I was writing, and I was like, oh no, I'm stopping to work on this other project, and it was really kind of frustrating. I will admit that. And then this is why I say it's a struggle, but it's worth it, is I do all this sort of work, do all this and take so much out of this, and then the book's done, and it's awesome. The book's awesome. So it's like, you feel this like emotional struggle, and you're struggling to make it happen, and then when the book comes out, it's so, so wonderful. So I'm definitely doing number 3. 3 is the last one, by the way. And yeah, my baby is a miracle. Exactly. It's exactly. Yeah, it's that same thing. I imagine it's a similar thing, not the same thing, but very similar. It's like the birthing process is a long and arduous one, but it's done, and it's a freaking miracle. So I'm so happy with the way these things come out, but I just needed to take a little break, make sure I handled some of my own stuff, and even that is sort of going to be questionable at this point. I actually, because SyncBook3 took me longer than it was supposed to, then we had this whole situation with us moving and things like that. My schedule of how I had sort of planned out my time is getting a little crunched here. So we are doing a book with Frater X, who's doing a book, The Secret War Inside Freemasonry. He's due to be giving me his draft of that in the next month or two, and I have to find time to take a look at that. And we actually have another gentleman who's pitched a book to me for SyncBook Press, which is a yogic perspective of the Gospel of Thomas, the Gnostic Gospel of Thomas, from a yogic perspective. And he sent that to me a few weeks ago, and I read it, and it's actually really, really good. So even though I don't have time for this kind of stuff, I'm like, all right, it's really good. I want to support you and help you put it out. So the time's sort of all lumping together, but I need, on a personal thing, I need to finish my book. So, I really love helping everyone bring their work to the forefront, but I need to be a little selfish in the next few months, or I have to find some time to be selfish. It's a little selfish because I have to finish this book. I've put so much time and energy into it, and I think about it every day, and I want to write this, and there isn't always the time. So I think the last time or might have even been the first time I spoke to you guys, we had talked about this book, and I said, well, when is it coming out? And I said, I don't know yet. And then all along I was thinking, okay, maybe I could try and do it end of 2012 or early spring 2013. But realistically, with all the delays that have come on anything and the extra workload that's coming up, it's going to be a little bit of an extra delay. Excuse me, I'm losing my voice here. It's going to be a little bit of an extra delay, but I promise you it's really going to be worth it. I'm really proud of what I have so far. It's, like I said, it's probably, I don't know, at this point I'm about 200 pages, pretty solidly finished. There are things that every day I'm tempted to just put it on the internet and just let people start reading it, because I think it's the kind of thing where I guess when I try and talk about some of these abstract ideas, to try and find a way to boil it down into, writing is a linear narrative. So we talk about all these sort of like weaving threads of history and synchronicities and all this sort of stuff, and trying to find a way to present it in such a way where it's actually understandable, that you can follow these different threads, even though they're sort of happening in little tangents or happening, coincidentally. It's the sort of thing where I just want to put it out. I'm really, really proud of it in a way I haven't been in a long time. About something I've done. So, but I want to do it right. I feel like it's the sort of thing where I not only have to be selfish, but I have to give it its proper due and do it right, because it's actually a really sensitive subject. Obviously, when we talk this idea of like how these things manifest in sometimes these violent ways. I mean, the book is called Suicide Kings, and I'm relating this to a spiritual process of ego death. But it has to be handled so delicately. This is why I kept trying to rewrite it and find the way to present this, is because I'm not trying to advocate actual suicide, and I don't want there to be any confusion there. And I don't want to confuse, I'm not advocating political assassination, when we're talking about JFK and all these things as being metaphors for this stuff. It doesn't mean that these are necessarily quote unquote good things. I'm not a supporter of violence in any way. But I can't deny how strongly these things play out, that these huge sort of cultural, historical nodes, these landmarks in time that people keep pointing to for all sorts of different reasons, and that continue to fascinate us. And I want to show that there's a reason that we have this fascination here. It's the struggling attempt, it's the sort of perverse or fumbling attempt at all these higher ideals. When we say, there's this sort of old psychoanalytical idea that every murder is a suicide turned outward or externalized, and at the same time, every murder is a suicide. A murder is a suicide turned outwards, and a suicide is a murder turned inwards. It's essentially this idea that you're expressing the same kind of emotion. To kill yourself, to kill another, is sort of psychologically equivalent. Now, so we have these assassinations, these murders, which represent a sort of attempt at killing yourself, and that's a really loaded phrase. But the idea of killing the ego or quieting the ego, such a delicate subject, and there's just so much confusion around it, and there's such risk for misunderstanding. So I just really feel like I have to do it justice and do it the right way. But to say, so that we have these ideas of when we say the Suicide King, there is a card, the King of Hearts playing card is known as the Suicide King. And the reason for this is that he holds a sword to his head. And we also see that if we translate this to the tarot, the suit of hearts is the equivalent of is cups. So this would be the King of Cups or the Grail King. And I was just sort of play with all these different mythologies, showing how they're all inherently telling the same story. And then we can look at our history here in America and see how these are telling the same story. So is this are we sharing a dream? Are these archetypes playing out in a sort of natural unfolding way? Or is this something that's, ritualistically planned? And there's just so many different ways to sort of take all these things, and I want to put all the data sort of side by side and let people figure out, where does synchronicity end? Or help me make sense of it? Because there come these points where you get these really gray areas where it's like, it seems like it really must be intentional. And yet all this other stuff seems like no one would have planned that, or no one could have planned that. And then you sort of put all those things side by side, and it's in a sense, it's sort of a riddle, it's sort of a puzzle that I'm hoping people will help me unravel. And at the same time, I think I've discovered things that I don't know why no one has pointed to before. Some of this stuff I'm astounded that no one has, I guess it's like for most conspiracy people, they're looking for the guy who pulled the strings, or who ordered it, or who's behind it, looking for all these things from this angle. But when you just sort of read it the way that I would read a movie, or the way I would read a dream, or the way I would analyze any story that you gave me, forgetting that it's actual historical event for a moment, the way, if you sort of read it like that, and you realize the symbolism is so in your face, and that the events, the names, the events are so crazy connected, it's just astounding to me, and I'm really enjoying it. I really want to share it with everyone soon, and I promise you I'm busting my ass over here, trying to get everything done, trying to keep SyncBook Press running and trying to keep my my wife and I fed and sheltered, but also to keep these books coming and to keep everything happening. I really, really, really am excited to share this stuff. So at this point, I don't think there's no way I'm making spring 2013, but if I learn to delegate some other jobs a little better, I will get this done very soon. So,
Well, we love our conversations with you, and we're really looking forward to Suicide Kings and SyncBook3. And you have a standing invitation with SkyBlue Symposia to return and discuss any of these things at any time, any of your projects.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate what you guys do. And, if anyone's listening to this, if I wanted to do this at the beginning, but if anyone's listening to this, if someone's made it this far into the conversation, I really encourage everyone to go through the archives at SkyBlue. I know it's a new show and there aren't, a tremendous amount of archives, but that's great because you can jump in when something's first starting off and it's not like, oh my God, now there's 3 years of archives I have to dig through. They're a young podcast, but they're great. And they've done a number of really, really solid interviews with guys that I love. So I really encourage everyone to please go dig through your archives. And as someone who gets to see a little bit of also the behind the scenes, this is one of the most professional, one of the most kind and thought-provoking groups that I've got to deal with in all my doing this. And I really, really hope people support what you're doing. If there's anything you guys ever need, like I said, I really, really wish you the best of luck, and I hope everyone checks out more of SkyBlue Symposia.
Thank you so much, Alan. That was very nice of you, and we appreciate your support, and happy to have you on here with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. It's always a pleasure chatting with you.
Same here. Like I said, I was really looking forward to this, and I thank you guys for rescheduling for me the last time, but I was really looking forward to this for a while, so it's good to talk to you all again.
Yeah, thank you, Alan, and I'm looking forward to your book. You have the kind of perspective to connect different kind of dots that I just think that's going to be interesting.
Alan, tell us about other events in which you were involved and where one can purchase your books.
Oh, thank you. My website is syncbook3.com, or you can go to thesyncbook.com. I should point out that sync, we're spelling S-Y-N-C. It's just S-Y-N-C, so we can do syncbook3.com or thesyncbook.com. My own website is allthehappycreatures.com.